Hello, how's it going? In today's video, I'm covering Clash of the Guardians, as well as Garona and the Guardian, from Chronicle Volume 2. So let's go! Aegwynn saw the dark portal and the green-skinned creatures camping in the black morass and thought, what's all this about? The Orcs were obviously hostile, and also laced with traces of the Burning Legion's destructive fell power. Aegwynn had never seen an Orc, or heard of Draenor before, but she could sense the portal was a bridge between the two worlds. But that wasn't the worst of it. She could also sense that this portal had been opened using a Guardian's power, and since she definitely didn't do it, there was only one other person on Azeroth capable. Her son, Medivh. The little bugger must have allied himself with the Legion. Bloody idiot. Accompanied by a blue dragon called Arcanagos, who she'd met during her exile, she headed for Karazhan to confront Medivh. When she arrived, she was a little bit surprised to see the tower was full of nobles, who were expecting some kind of party or something. She entered the tower alone, intending to reason with Medivh. Maybe he'd give up his power peacefully. Nope. Sargeras had now taken full control over Medivh's mind, suppressing his thoughts and emotions, and controlling his movement. He revealed to her that the darkness her son had felt was the same darkness she'd experienced, and it was nothing to do with their power or the burden of being a guardian. A portion of him had been inside her after they fought in Northrend, and he'd been inside Medivh ever since he was born. So how'd you like them apples? Aegwynn was stunned. She didn't like that news at all. She'd doomed her son to a life as a Legion slave. Her entire tenure as guardian had been meaningless. A lesser person would have been consumed by despair by all of this, but Aegwynn isn't a lesser person. She's just got bloody angry instead. And she decided, even if it meant striking her own son down in the process, she would destroy Sargeras here and now. So they started fighting. The entire tower began to shake, and the nobles were all like, bloody cheese it! Arcanagos jumped in at some point to assist his buddy, as Sargeras had temporarily incapacitated her with a spell. But despite the fact Arcanagos was a dragon, he was severely outmatched, and Sargeras burned him from the inside out. And as you can imagine, he died from that. Pretty sad, man. This made Aegwynn even more angry. She drew on this rage to break free from Sargeras' spell. Although Sargeras had access to a Guardian's full power, Aegwynn had centuries of experience. The battle raged on through the tower, and she gradually began to gain the upper hand. Sargeras, pretty desperate at this point, reached out to power one final assault. In the same way Gul'dan had drained the life from the Draenei prisoners to open the dark portal, Sargeras ripped the life out of hundreds of humans that were still trying to cheese it from the tower. The only human spared was Morose. He then pushed Medivh to destroy Aegwynn once and for all, but a small part resisted the command. Instead, she was banished from Karazhan and hurled elsewhere. The real Medivh had no idea where he'd sent her, but he could no longer sense her presence on Azeroth. After the battle, Sargeras retreated back to the depths of Medivh's soul, and the Guardian regained control. He had no memory of Sargeras' influence, but he knew he'd clashed with his mother. He feared that he'd lost control again, just like that time he accidentally exploded his dad, and then fell into a coma. Also, he'd slaughtered some of the most important nobles in the Kingdom of Stormwind, so that wasn't great. The only survivor, Morose, seemed to have been driven half mad by this ordeal. Medivh tried to ease his suffering by purging the memories of that day, but he never really was the same again. And neither was Karazhan. It had grown darker and now it was haunted. The spirits of many of the slain humans would wander its halls and grounds for many years. Meanwhile, more Horde forces had poured through the dark portal. Garona had come through, had a little look-see, and then returned to Draenor and reported to Gul'dan. The hooded stranger was nowhere to be found, and Gul'dan was a little bit annoyed by this. As the Orcs fanned out across the Black Morass, they encountered some human hunters and traders. They dealt with them very easily, but did capture some alive. For no reason really. The Orcs didn't understand the language these humans spoke, so there really wasn't any point to keeping them prisoner. But Garona had a talent for learning languages, so she spent a lot of time talking to the prisoners in exchange for a bit of food and water. One of the prisoners, who we shall refer to as Keith, would constantly curse at the Orcs, and he'd yell about how the Orcs were all doomed to die because Stormwind had a great mage who had single-handedly defeated an entire troll army. Classic Keith. Garona simply listened to Keith long enough to come away with a name and a location. Medivh, who lived in Karazhan. The Shadow Council assassin set out on her own to do a bit of recon. She hoped to inspect the tower without being spotted, but she picked a really crap time to be honest, because Medivh had just battled his own mum and killed a load of important people. Medivh was in a really bad mood obviously, and captured Garona the moment he sensed her intrusion. And Garona was pretty convinced this was the end for her. She didn't necessarily realise this was the same stranger who'd visited them on Draenor, but she could see there was great darkness in him. But Medivh didn't kill her. She obviously had no information he needed, but she was a curious thing. She was neither truly Orc or truly Draenei. She was an outcast, just like him. Also, she was remarkably intelligent. Plus, she's super sexy. What's more, it was pretty obvious she had no real love for the Horde. Gul'dan had been endlessly cruel to her. Medivh figured it would be nice to have an ally, or even a friend, among the Orcs. So he freed her, but also extended an invitation. You can come to Karazhan whenever you want, sugar tits. Garona returned to Gul'dan and informed him of what she'd seen. However, Gul'dan already knew. He had a firm grip on Garona's mind and had watched the entire exchange. He'd realised what Garona hadn't. Medivh was the hooded stranger. He's human, which is pathetic. Gul'dan would definitely kill the mage himself once his usefulness had expired. But first, he needed to know where the tomb of Sargeras was. So he ordered Garona to dig up whatever knowledge she could from Medivh's home. And we're leaving it there! In the next Volume 2 video, Lothar is going to make first contact with the Orcs, and Khadgar is going to be introduced as Medivh's apprentice. As always, thanks very much to those of you who support the channel as patrons. Links in the description if anyone's interested in supporting the channel in that way. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks. And all that's left to say is, thanks for watching, and see ya!